My name is Elise Hart. I'm 31 years old, and I grew up believing that the spotlight belonged to everyone but me. My sister wore crowns, posed for cameras, and filled every room with applause, while I stayed behind the curtain, holding scripts no one cared to read. For years, I told myself that maybe I wasn't meant to shine, that my place was to make others sparkle. But last Sunday night, under the golden lights of the Dolby Theater, something changed. I walked on stage, trembling, and held an Oscar in my hands, not for beauty, not for perfection, but for words that once lived only in the dark. And as the world clapped, the only sound I heard was silence, the silence of those who had never believed I could be seen. Have you ever had to build your own spotlight when no one offered you one? Tell me where you're watching from. Because in this story, you'll see how pain can turn into purpose, and how even the quietest voice can light up the whole room. I still remember the first time I realized the world inside our house revolved around someone else. My sister, Lily, had just turned 8, and my parents threw her a pageant-themed birthday party in our backyard. Pink ribbons hung from every tree, a little stage was built from wooden pallets, and every neighbor was invited. I was 6, sitting cross-legged on the grass, holding the camcorder Dad had given me, so you can help record your sister's big day. I remember how he said it with pride, his voice light, almost dismissive, as if my purpose that day was to make sure Lily's spotlight never dimmed. From then on, it became a pattern I could map across every year, every holiday, every photograph hanging in the hallway. There was always Lily smiling, glowing, crowned, and somewhere near the edge of the frame, there was me, the unnamed extra, the helper, the one who fetched water, pinned dresses, held the mirror. At family dinners, the pattern continued. The table at home was long enough for 8, but somehow, I always ended up on the folding chair at the far end, the one that squeaked if you shifted your weight too much. My mother would say it was because Lily needs to sit near the light for her skin tone, and I would nod, pretending I didn't notice how the light bulb cast everyone else in gold and left my seat in shadow. During Christmas, the gifts beneath the tree always came in pairs: one large box wrapped in glittering paper with Lily's name carefully written in cursive, and one smaller, plain box with mine scribbled in my father's rushed handwriting. Sometimes, the second box wasn't there at all. "You're older now," my mother would say. "You don't need toys. You should be helping me with the table." That phrase, helping with the table, became my unspoken role. While others laughed and ate, I cleared plates, refilled glasses, wiped crumbs no one else saw. I told myself it was fine. I was useful. But deep down, I knew what it meant. I was the one who served, not the one who was celebrated. There was one Thanksgiving when I tried to change that. I had written a poem at school that won a small regional prize, just a laminated certificate and a ribbon, but it felt like magic to me. I spent the whole car ride home rehearsing the lines, hoping to read it aloud after dinner. When dessert was served, I took a breath, stood up, and started. For the quiet hearts who wait. But before I could finish the first stanza, Mom interrupted. "Sweetheart, could you move? Lily's trying to show Grandma her new tiara." The table burst into polite laughter, and I froze, my ribbon slipping from my fingers, disappearing under the tablecloth. That moment carved itself into me like a scar. Even when I found my voice, no one wanted to hear it. The favoritism wasn't cruel in the loud, obvious way. It was quiet, constant, woven into the air we breathed. When Lily entered her first local pageant, the house turned into a dressing room. Every surface shimmered with sequins, every mirror fogged with hairspray. I remember sitting on the floor, cutting out pictures from magazines to make a vision board for my film idea, a story about 2 sisters, one seen, one unseen. My mother leaned over, looked at the mess of paper and glue, and smiled faintly. "That's cute, honey. But remember, beautiful girls get further in life." She said it like a joke, but it landed like a prophecy. That night, I stared at my reflection in the dark window, wondering what beautiful even meant. My face looked like my father's side, serious eyes, thin lips, skin that burned easily. not pageant pretty. So I turned away from the mirror and toward my notebooks. If I couldn't be seen, maybe I could make something that would be. I started writing little scripts on the back of math homework, stealing my sister's old dolls to act out scenes. I borrowed Dad's phone to shoot tiny videos, blurry, shaky, but full of imagination. I wrote about girls who ran away from small towns, women who built things no one believed in. Sometimes, I tried to show my parents. "That's nice," Dad would mumble without looking up from the TV. "But Lily's got a big show next weekend. Maybe you can film it for her again." Over the years, the distance grew. I became the girl behind the camera, behind the curtain, behind the applause. I laughed when they laughed, clapped when they clapped, and disappeared when the spotlight turned. They called me Lily's sister so many times that I began introducing myself that way too, just to make it easier. But in the quiet hours after everyone went to bed, I would pull out my worn notebook and write by the yellow glow of my desk lamp. Those pages were my rebellion, my secret voice. I didn't know it then, but every word I wrote was a small act of survival, a way of reminding myself that even if no one saw me, I was still here. My room was barely big enough to fit a bed, a wooden desk, and a single shelf stacked with dog-eared notebooks, but to me it was a world apart. The door didn't lock, yet the moment it clicked shut, the noise of the house stole the constant hum of the hairdryer, the metallic click of high heels, the rehearsed laughter my mother used whenever my sister entered a room. Inside my small sanctuary, the air smelled of paper, coffee, and the faint heat from the yellow desk lamp that buzzed when it got too hot. That lamp became my moon. Every night it lit the same ritual. Me hunched over the desk, pencil between my fingers, trying to trap the words before they fled. On the floor, piles of half-finished scripts sat like miniature cities, each one a failed attempt to build a world where someone like me mattered. I had an old camcorder from Dad, one he gave up on after the lens cracked. I fixed it with clear tape and a prayer. It couldn't focus properly, but it didn't need to. It was my silent accomplice. I would set it up on a stack of textbooks, act out small scenes in the mirror: a woman leaving home, a girl arguing with her reflection, a mother apologizing too late, then watch the playback frame by frame, trying to understand why some moments felt alive and others didn't. It was my version of pageant practice, except there was no crown at the end, just the satisfaction of getting a line right. Most nights I wrote until my hand cramped. When I finally checked my phone, it would be 2 or 3 in the morning. The house would be dark, except for the sliver of light under my door. Sometimes my sister would knock on the wall as a warning. "Turn that thing off. I have an early rehearsal." I'd whisper, "Sorry," shut the lamp, and keep writing under the glow of my screen. The sound of her sleep machine through the wall became my metronome. By the time I was 17, I had a folder labeled submissions. It was full of hope and rejection. I entered screenwriting contests, small film festivals, online workshops. The responses came back the same. "Thank you for submitting, but we've decided to go in another direction." Sometimes they didn't reply at all. I printed the rejection emails, pinned them above my desk in a neat grid. I wanted to see them not as failures, but as proof that I was at least knocking on the door of a world that didn't yet know I existed. The only person who seemed to see me was my grandmother. She lived 2 towns away and spent her afternoons watching old black and white films with subtitles. When I visited, she'd turn down the volume and say, "Listen to this line. Do you hear how it lingers?" She was the first person to tell me that silence could speak louder than dialogue. Once, I showed her a short script I had written about 2 sisters who loved each other but didn't know how to say it. She read it slowly, her finger tracing the sentences, and then she said something I never forgot. "Your voice doesn't need a crown, sweetheart. It needs a room that listens." I didn't realize it then, but she was handing me the permission I'd been craving my entire life. At school, I found another quiet believer, Mr. Campbell, my literature teacher. He lent me books that no one else in class cared about. Salinger, Woolf, Baldwin. He'd circle my essays with red ink, not to correct but to challenge. Dig deeper. Don't tell me how it feels. Show me. When I told him my parents wanted me to focus on something practical, he smiled and said, "The world runs on stories, Elise. They just don't all know it yet." Still, the loneliness never left. Every time I mailed out a script or clicked submit, I imagined a faceless reader somewhere rolling their eyes before deleting it. I imagined my words dissolving into a digital void while my sister stood on real stages, surrounded by real applause. Sometimes I hated her for how easily she received what I worked so hard for attention. But mostly, I hated myself for still wanting it. The night before graduation, I stayed up writing a short film script titled The Shadow Girl. It was about a girl who could only exist when no one looked directly at her. When morning came, my eyes burned from lack of sleep, but I felt alive. I promised myself something then, not out loud, just in the space between one heartbeat and the next. One day, the spotlight would find me. Not because I chased it, not because I begged for it, but because my words would demand it. That vow carried me through the years that followed. Every rejection, every moment I stood on the sidelines watching someone else be adored, I repeated it to myself like a prayer: I will build my own stage. My own light. My own seat. I didn't know how long it would take, or what it would cost, but I knew this: I was done waiting for someone to hand me a crown. I would carve my name into the credits instead. When the acceptance letter arrived, it didn't even feel real at first. The envelope was thin, unimpressive, not the kind of paper you'd expect to carry a miracle. But inside, there it was. "Congratulations, you've been awarded a full scholarship to the screenwriting program at USC." I held the letter in both hands, rereading it so many times the ink nearly smudged. I'd done it. After years of writing in secret, of scraping words together like spare change, someone finally saw me. I ran downstairs, breathless, waving the letter like a flag. My mother looked up from curling my sister's hair and frowned as if I'd interrupted something sacred. "USC? That's in Los Angeles," she said, her tone flat. "That's so far, and expensive. You know your sister's preparing for Miss State. We can't be running around helping you move." My father added without looking up from the paper, "It's just film stuff, right? You can do that online." I stood there, the letter trembling in my hand, realizing they hadn't even heard the word scholarship. I tried to explain that tuition was covered, that it was one of the best programs in the country, that this was the door I'd been dreaming of knocking on. But my mother just sighed. "You always choose the hardest way, Elise. Why can't you be more like Lily? She knows what she wants, and it's right here." Her words hit like a quiet verdict. Ambition was admirable in my sister, but inconvenient in me. That night, I packed alone. Grandma called to say she was proud, that I'd finally found my road. "Don't wait for anyone to clap for you," she said softly. "Just keep walking." Los Angeles was nothing like the movies. My first apartment was a studio shared with 2 other students, both broke and caffeinated beyond reason. My corner was a pull-out sofa that smelled faintly of espresso and floor cleaner. By day, I worked as a barista on Melrose, memorizing the regulars' orders, saving every tip for rent. By night, I interned on film sets, not glamorous Hollywood ones, but low-budget commercials where I carried equipment, labeled water bottles, and stood in the heat for hours, pretending not to care when people brushed past me like I was invisible. Still, I wrote. No matter how tired, I made myself write 5 pages a day. Sometimes they were nonsense, sometimes just descriptions of sounds or feelings, but I wrote them anyway. The words became my anchor. Money was always short. I survived on instant noodles, gas station sandwiches, and free coffee from work. My hands were constantly sticky with milk foam, my back sore from lifting cases of bottled water. But every rejection email, every shift that ended at midnight, every missed call from home reminded me why I was here, to earn a voice that couldn't be ignored. Once, my sister sent me a photo from her pageant rehearsal, smiling beneath glittering stage lights. Her caption read, "Almost there." I looked at it for a long moment, then turned back to my script. I didn't have sequins or a stage, but I had stories. That would have to be enough. In my second semester, a professor announced that the advanced writing class would host a table read for selected students, a chance to hear professional actors read our work aloud. My hands shook as I submitted my script, a quiet drama about two sisters growing apart. When I saw my name on the list, I thought it was a mistake. On the day of the reading, I arrived early, heart pounding. The classroom was small, the walls lined with folding chairs. The actors came in people I'd only ever seen in student films and began reading my words. Hearing them speak lines I had written in the half-light of my apartment was surreal. My pulse raced like I was backstage before a show, waiting for a cue that never came. When the reading ended, the room clapped politely. The professor smiled. "Good work, Elise. You have an ear for honesty." That was all he said, but it felt like a standing ovation. I walked home that night with the city lights spilling across my path, the noise of traffic humming like applause only I could hear. For once, I wasn't the girl sitting at the far end of the table. I had built my own, even if it was just a circle of folding chairs, even if no one knew my name yet. Still, when I called home to share the news, my mother barely paused before saying, "That's nice, honey. But did you see your sister's latest photos? She's in the paper again." I stared at my phone, the excitement fading, replaced by the same quiet ache I'd carried since childhood. But this time, I didn't let it stop me. I hung up, turned on my laptop, and opened a new blank page. My fingers hovered over the keys before I whispered the promise I'd made years ago. One day, the spotlight will come from what I write. Then I began to type. The first real opportunity came disguised as chaos. A classmate from film school, Jonah, called one night while I was wiping down espresso machines after a double shift. "Elise," he said, breathless. "I'm shooting a micro-budget short this weekend." The writer bailed. "I need a script, something small, real, cheap." I laughed, because everything in my life was already small, real, and cheap. Still, I pulled out my notebook during my 10-minute break, scribbled out a 5-page story about a girl waiting for her mother in a parking lot, and sent it to him before my shift ended. He texted back at 2 a.m., "We're shooting this tomorrow." We filmed behind an abandoned strip mall under buzzing fluorescent lights. The actors were friends of friends, the crew a handful of sleep-deprived students. We borrowed a spotlight from the theater department and powered it with a generator that coughed louder than the dialogue. My job was everything: script supervisor, assistant director, sound tech, even caterer. I remember holding a boom pole in one hand, while stirring instant noodles in a styrofoam cup with the other. It was absurd and perfect. When the camera rolled, something inside me quieted. The parking lot shimmered under the light, the actress whispered the lines I had written on the back of a receipt, and for a moment the world made sense. After the shoot, we edited in Jonah's living room on a borrowed laptop. The final film was 10 minutes long and cost less than $200. We titled it White Lines, after the faint stripes that divided the cracked asphalt. A few months later, Jonah submitted it to a small film festival in Nevada, one of those second-tier events that accepted nearly anything. We forgot about it until an email arrived. Official selection. We drove there in his beat-up sedan, sleeping in the car, living off granola bars and gas station coffee. On the night of the screening, maybe 30 people filled the theater: locals, a few critics, a handful of filmmakers just like us. When the lights dimmed and the title card appeared, I gripped my knees so hard my nails left crescents in my skin. The projector flickered, the sound popped, but when the last scene faded to black, the room stayed silent for a beat before clapping. Not thunderous applause, not standing ovations, just soft, steady clapping, the kind that felt real. Afterward, a woman approached me, an older film critic who wrote for a small online magazine. She said, "That story. It's quiet, but it lingers. You have something there." I didn't know how to reply. I just thanked her and stepped outside into the cold desert air, staring up at a sky littered with stars that felt closer than they ever had in the city. The next morning, Jonah shook me awake, grinning. We won something. I blinked at the screen of his phone. Audience Award, short film category. It wasn't much a certificate and a $200 check, but I felt like I'd just been handed a crown made of light. I posted one picture on social media. A blurry photo of me holding the certificate in front of the theater, hair messy, eyes half closed. Within minutes, my mother replied with a heart emoji, then immediately sent another photo my sister, Chloe, standing on stage with a sash across her chest, holding a bouquet of roses. Her caption read, "Proud of you, Chloe, you shine brightest." The family group chat flooded with congratulations for her. For me, silence. I put the phone face down and let it buzz until it stopped. That night, I sat alone in the motel lobby, scrolling through the festival's website. In a tiny section under highlights, I saw my name. Elise Hart, writer. It wasn't bold, it wasn't large, but it was there. My name, visible to strangers. It felt like oxygen. I took a screenshot and sent it to Grandma. Minutes later, she replied, "I knew your words would find their room." When we returned to Los Angeles, the blog review from that same critic appeared online. It was only 3 paragraphs, but the last line made me freeze. White Lines reveals a storyteller unafraid of silence. Remember that name, Elise Hart. It was the first time a stranger had said my name in print, not followed by Lily's sister, not footnoted under someone else's success. Just me. A week later, I received an email from an independent producer named Maya Brooks. She wrote, "Saw your short at Silver Sands. Let's talk. Your voice is different." I thought it was spam until she called. "You write women like they've lived 1,000 lives," she said. "It's raw. We're developing a low-budget feature. I want you to write it. Can you expand White Lines into a full script?" I almost dropped the phone. No one had ever used want and me in the same sentence like that before. "Yes," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I can." That night, I opened a new document, titled it "The Distance Between," and stared at the blinking cursor. I didn't have an agent, or experience, or confidence, but I had stories, thousands of them, stacked like unlit candles. And finally, someone was handing me a match. While I worked on the draft, my parents called less and less. When they did, it was usually about Chloe. "She's training for nationals now," Mom said once, her voice proud and tired. "She's really becoming something." I wanted to say, "So am I," but instead, I just smiled and asked if she'd seen the review. She hadn't. I realized then that I'd stopped expecting them to. For the first time, I didn't need their applause to know my worth. I had strangers in dark theaters who stayed after the credits rolled. I had the hum of the projector, the weight of my own words filling the silence. My first break wasn't the kind they'd recognize, no tiara, no sash, no spotlight, but for me, it was everything. It was proof that, even in the smallest of rooms, even under borrowed light, I could still make the world listen. The feature I wrote for Maya took nearly a year to finish, a year of insomnia and cheap takeout and rewriting scenes until my eyes blurred. We called it The Distance Between, a quiet story about women reclaiming their voices after years of being dismissed. A story I didn't realize was really about me until the last line. We shot it on borrowed cameras, under flickering fluorescent lights, using real apartments and grocery stores as sets. I spent long nights on set, rewriting dialogue while the crew packed cables, and at sunrise, we'd huddle around monitors with styrofoam cups of coffee, watching the footage in silence. When the film was finally done, we didn't expect much. But a small streaming platform picked it up not for fame, but for its authentic female voice. It was surreal seeing my name appear on the screen. Written by Elise Hart. The credits scrolled, my name tiny but visible, glowing softly in the corner of the television. I watched it alone, cross-legged on my apartment floor, pizza box beside me, tears running without permission. No parties, no champagne, just a small rented room and the sound of my heartbeat syncing with the end credits. For the first time in my life, I had built something permanent. Something that couldn't be talked over or forgotten. The film quietly found its audience. A few reviewers online called it raw and introspective. Women wrote to me on social media, mothers, daughters, people who said they cried because they saw themselves in those characters. I replied to every message, not as a screenwriter, but as one of them, someone still healing. I told myself I didn't need my family's validation anymore. That was the story I kept repeating, like a mantra I wasn't sure I believed. Then came the family reunion. It had been nearly 2 years since I'd seen them all together. My sister had just won a national title, and my parents were planning a small dinner at home to celebrate. I flew back to Indiana for the first time in ages, landing in a world that looked unchanged: the same house, same curtains, same faint smell of hairspray. The dining room was dressed like a ballroom. Golden tablecloths shimmered under the chandelier, and in the center sat a large framed photo of Chloe wearing her new crown, surrounded by roses. I walked in carrying a small gift, a DVD copy of my film. It felt foolish, but I wanted to share it, even if just a little. My father hugged me stiffly, my mother kissed my cheek like she was greeting a polite stranger. "You look tired," she said. "Work keeping you busy?" I nodded. Chloe swept into the room in a silver dress, glowing like she'd been lit from within. Everyone turned toward her at once, clapping, complimenting, orbiting. I placed the DVD quietly on the corner of the table. Dinner was a performance, laughter choreographed, questions directed only at my sister. They discussed pageant etiquette, interview strategies, how to maintain posture under pressure. When my aunt asked what I'd been working on, I smiled and said, "My second film just went up on Streamview last month. It's about women rediscovering their voice after trauma." My father chuckled, waving his hand as if brushing away a fly. "Those things are hard to follow. Heavy topics. Let's talk about something real. Chloe, tell them about your next competition." The table shifted like a spotlight turning away, and the moment vanished. I sat there, fork idle, forcing a smile while the conversation danced around me. Chloe spoke about gowns, sponsors, media training. Everyone nodded, clinked glasses, interrupted each other with enthusiasm. I wanted to disappear, not out of anger, but exhaustion. Even after all these years, I was still sitting at the far end of the table, the same squeaky folding chair from childhood replaced now by something sleeker but just as unstable. The chandelier's light didn't quite reach me, my plate reflected its dull shadow. I realized I had been chasing the same impossible thing my whole life, a seat where I didn't have to earn my right to exist. After dinner, I offered to take a group photo. "You always get the best angles," my mother said, handing me her phone. I stood behind the lens while they arranged themselves, father in the middle, Chloe at the front, mother fixing her hair. They smiled as I counted down. 3, 2, 1. The flash went off, freezing them in perfect symmetry, a picture of pride and success. But when I looked at the screen, all I could think was how much I resembled the ghost behind the camera, the invisible photographer of her own family. Later that night, I slipped out to the porch while they laughed inside. The autumn air smelled of damp leaves and cold metal. I sat on the steps, hugging my knees, watching my breath fog in the air. Through the window, I saw them raising their glasses again. The sound of their laughter floated outside, muffled by the glass but still unmistakably bright. I tried to feel envy, but what I felt instead was distance, not just physical but cosmic. We were light years apart, speaking different languages of success. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was Maya, my producer. "Check your email. There's interest from another platform and a journalist wants to interview you." I stared at the message, my reflection faint in the dark glass of the phone. Inside, the family toast echoed again. I stood up slowly, brushed the dirt off my jeans, and smiled to myself. That night, as the laughter faded behind me, I understood something quietly devastating but freeing. Sometimes silence isn't proof of failure, it's space for your own voice to grow louder. I no longer needed to be seen at that table. I was already building a bigger one somewhere else, one story at a time. It was 5:12 inches the morning when the phone rang. The sound cut through the dark like a thread snapping. I almost ignored it, thinking it was just another spam call, but when I saw Maya's name flashing on the screen, I sat up, heart pounding. Her voice came through before I could even speak. "Elise," she whispered, breathless. "You're nominated." For a second, I thought she was joking, a prank born of too many late-night edits. "What?" I asked, my throat dry. "For what?" There was a pause, then her voice broke into a laugh and a sob all at once. "The Academy, Best Original Screenplay." The distance between just made the list. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. My mind went blank, and all I could hear was the faint ticking of the clock above my bed. I leaned back against the wall, the cool plaster pressing into my spine, and stared at the ceiling as if it could confirm what I'd just heard. A small patch of sunlight was beginning to push through the blinds, cutting across the messy stack of notebooks on my desk, the same ones I'd written in years ago, sitting on that squeaky chair, trying to convince myself that words could be enough. I whispered, barely audible, "I did it." Then I laughed quietly, almost in disbelief. After all the rejections, the small festivals, the silent family dinners, I did it. Maya kept talking, her voice full of excitement. "They'll make it public in 2 hours. Don't post anything yet. We'll coordinate with PR. You'll need a stylist, a dress, we'll handle the details." I nodded even though she couldn't see me. "Okay," I managed to say, "but let's keep it quiet for now." She hesitated. "Are you sure? This is huge, Elise. Everyone will know soon." I closed my eyes. I just need a little time to breathe. When the call ended, I sat there for a long time, watching the light grow stronger across the floor. My phone started buzzing with notifications as entertainment pages began updating their lists. Tweets, articles, posts, all flashing my name next to films I had studied and admired for years. Yet somehow, instead of shouting it to the world, I wanted silence. I didn't post, didn't call anyone, not even Grandma. Because deep down, I knew what would happen if my family found out too soon. They'd turn it into a side note in someone else's story. "Chloe's sister got something. Our daughter wrote a film, I think. It's complicated." No, I wanted this moment to belong only to me. For once, the light would not be borrowed. The days leading up to the Oscars blurred together. My inbox filled with interview requests, event schedules, instructions from publicists who spoke in brisk, polished sentences. I tried to stay grounded. I still made my morning coffee, still walked to the small park near my apartment, still wrote for an hour every day. When the stylist asked what kind of look I wanted for the ceremony, I said, simple, classic. No glitter, no train, no spectacle. I chose a black dress, clean lines, open back, elegant but understated. The kind of dress that didn't scream for attention, but made space for it when it arrived. Maya laughed when she saw it. "You look like the calm before a storm," she said. I smiled. Maybe that's exactly what I am. 2 nights before the ceremony, I met with Mrs. Lang, my old mentor from USC. She had been the first professor who ever told me my scripts breathed. We sat across from each other in her small apartment filled with books and half-burned candles. She was older now, her silver hair gathered into a loose bun, her voice softer but still sharp with clarity. "I watched your film again last week," she said, pouring tea into chipped cups. "It's still the same truth, quiet but relentless." I thanked her, unsure how to hold the magnitude of what she had given me all those years ago. When I told her about the nomination, she didn't look surprised. Instead, she smiled the way someone does when something inevitable finally happens. "You've been walking toward that moment since you were a child," she said. "Do you remember what I told you back then?" I shook my head. "That you were writing your way to your seat." She leaned closer, her eyes bright. "Well, this Sunday night, you'll see it. Your own chair, with your name on it. Don't look for your family in the audience. Don't look for approval. Just sit down, take a breath, and remember this time, the light is yours. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake imagining the theater, the red carpet, the ocean of flashing cameras. I pictured the seat Mrs. Lang spoke of a single chair with a nameplate that said Elise Hart. I tried to imagine what it would feel like to walk down that aisle, to hear the applause, to know that somewhere in that vast room, surrounded by the world's brightest lights, my story had carved out a space that no one could take away. The morning of the ceremony, Los Angeles glimmered under a perfect, indifferent Sunday. I stood in front of the mirror, fastening the small pearl earrings Grandma had given me years ago. The black dress hugged me like confidence I hadn't yet learned to trust. Maya arrived with her team, offering last-minute advice, her phone buzzing nonstop. "Ready?" she asked. I nodded. As I'll ever be. When the car pulled up to the Dolby Theater, a wave of sound rolled toward us, the hum of photographers, reporters, the rhythm of applause echoing off marble walls. As I stepped out, flashes exploded like lightning. For a moment, I froze. Then, somewhere behind me, I heard Mrs. Lang's voice in my head. "Don't look for them. Look for your seat." I thanked her, unsure how to hold the magnitude of what she had given me all those years ago. When I told her about the nomination, she didn't look surprised. Instead, she smiled the way someone does when something inevitable finally happens. "You've been walking toward that moment since you were a child," she said. "Do you remember what I told you back then?" I shook my head. "That you were writing your way to your seat." She leaned closer, her eyes bright. Backstage, everything pulsed with quiet chaos. Stage managers whispered into headsets, their voices clipped and calm. 2 minutes to cue. Keep the aisle clear. Where's the next presenter? Assistants hurried past me with clipboards and lanyards swinging. Makeup artists made last-minute touch-ups. Someone tripped over a cable and laughed nervously. I stood still amid the whirlwind, clutching the small clutch in my hands, my heart beating too fast to match my breathing. Maya squeezed my arm. "Remember what Lang said," she whispered. "Find your seat. It's waiting." The ceremony began in a blur of light. The orchestra swelled, the host cracked jokes that everyone half laughed at, names and faces floated past in a golden haze. My category was somewhere near the middle of the night, Best Original Screenplay. I knew the order by heart. I'd studied the timeline obsessively. 36 categories, 3 hours, 1 chance. When the previous award finished, a stagehand signaled for my group of nominees to line up at the side entrance. My legs felt heavier than they ever had. I could hear muffled applause from beyond the curtain, like waves crashing far away. The presenter's voice echoed faintly through the speakers. "And now, the nominees for Best Original Screenplay." The screen behind the stage began flashing clips, one from a war film, another from a dark comedy, then a small, quiet moment from the distance between, 2 women sitting on a porch, sunlight spilling between them, the sound of wind filling the silence. My breath caught. I remembered writing that scene at 2 a.m., eating dry cereal, wondering if anyone would ever see it. Now it was being projected across the world. The presenter's voice carried the names, one by one, until mine. And Elise Hart, for The Distance Between. The sound of applause rose, soft but real. For a second, everything blurred. My hands trembled against the silk fabric of my dress. The camera light swung toward me, red and unflinching. I smiled instinctively, small and unsure, while the world saw the woman I had built from the girl no one clapped for. Then came the pause, that eternal second between nomination and fate. The presenter held the golden envelope, milked the silence, the audience leaning forward as if gravity itself had tilted. My hearing dimmed. All I could register was my heartbeat, steady and wild. The card was opened, the breath of the entire theater suspended in midair. And the Oscar goes to a heartbeat. Then, Elise Hart, The Distance Between. I didn't move at first. My body refused to believe it. People around me were standing, clapping. Maya was shaking my shoulders, laughing through tears. I stood up slowly, the world suddenly too bright. The orchestra struck its cue, triumphant and dizzying. I walked down the aisle, lights exploding around me like fireflies. Faces turned as I passed, familiar, distant, unreal. The carpet beneath my heels felt softer than it should have, almost like air. At the bottom of the steps, a man in a tuxedo extended his hand, guiding me toward the stage. Everything else vanished: the noise, the audience, even the cameras, until it was just me and that impossible glow waiting at the podium. The presenter handed me the statue. The metal was warm, heavier than I expected, as if every story I'd ever written had condensed into that single, golden weight. My hands shook, and I had to hold it with both to keep from dropping it. The microphone loomed in front of me, and beyond it a sea of faces, endless light, silence sharp enough to cut. I could hear my own breath. I thought of the parking lot where we shot white lines, of the nights at the barista counter, of the folding chair at my family's table. I thought of my grandmother, of Mrs. Lang, of that promise, whispered to no one but myself. When I began to speak, my voice came out smaller than I expected, shaky, intimate, real. I was never the loudest one in the room, I said. I grew up watching other people take the spotlight, believing that maybe some of us were just meant to stand behind the camera, behind the curtain, behind the applause. But I learned something. My throat tightened, but I kept going. For every kid who's ever been pushed to the edge of the table, told to keep quiet, told their story doesn't matter right anyway. Build your own table. Tell it anyway. The audience was still. For a moment, I thought I'd said too much, or not enough, and then the applause came, deep and rolling, wrapping around me like heat. I smiled through tears I hadn't realized were falling. The orchestra began to play the exit cue. As I turned toward the wings, I looked down at the statue one last time. Its gold surface reflected the light in a way that made it seem alive, flickering, pulsing, breathing. Backstage, people clapped, hugged, snapped photos. Maya caught me by the shoulders, eyes shining. "You did it, Elise. You really did it." I laughed, breathless. "I still can't feel my legs." She grinned. "Good, that means it's real." Reporters lined up near the curtain, microphones ready, but I wasn't ready to speak again. I slipped away to a quiet corner near the service corridor, where the noise dulled to a soft hum. My hands still trembled. I opened my phone, instinctively, maybe out of habit, maybe out of hope. The screen lit up. There were hundreds of messages: journalists, classmates, old professors, strangers, even the critic from White Lines. But when I scrolled further down, I found what I was looking for: the family group chat. The last message there was 3 days old. From Mom. "We're so tired after your sister's pageant. Need some rest, don't wait up." Beneath it, a single thumbs up from Dad. That was all. No new texts, no calls. No. "We're proud of you." Just silence. I stared at it, the bright glow of the screen reflecting in my tear-lined eyes, and for the first time in my life, the silence didn't hurt. It simply confirmed what I already knew: their table, their spotlight, their applause had never been mine to win. I locked the phone, set it face down, and took a deep breath. Outside the curtain, the show went on: laughter, speeches, cameras flashing like lightning. Somewhere, in another city, my parents were probably asleep, dreaming of the next crown, the next stage, the next photograph that had nothing to do with me. And yet, somehow, it didn't matter anymore. Because tonight, the world had turned its head and, for once, seen me. A stagehand appeared, smiling. "Miss Hart, we need you for press photos." I nodded, wiping under my eyes carefully. As I followed him back toward the light, I caught a glimpse of the stage through the gap in the curtain: the chair Mrs. Lang had promised, engraved with my name. I felt the words echo inside me like a quiet heartbeat. "Your seat is here." Under the blaze of 1,000 flashes, I lifted the statue once more. My smile wasn't the polished grin of a performer. It was something quieter, steadier, the expression of a woman who had finally stepped into her own story. And, as the cameras clicked, the weight in my hands no longer felt heavy. It felt earned. By morning, the world had already decided what my speech meant. Clips of it flooded every platform, edited, captioned, quoted over slow piano music. Someone on Twitter looped the moment I said, "Build your own table," with the caption, "She didn't just win an Oscar, she rewrote the script." Within 12 hours, the hashtag number seat at the table was trending worldwide. Every major outlet ran a story. The quiet writer who stole the night, from behind the camera to the spotlight, the woman who spoke for the unseen. My phone turned into a living thing, buzzing, glowing, refusing to rest. Messages from journalists, old classmates, people I hadn't spoken to in years. Emails from production companies, brand offers, podcasts. Even strangers sent paragraphs about how that one sentence for the kids at the edge of the table had made them cry. But the message that stopped me cold came not from Hollywood, but from home. Mom. Her name blinked across the screen again and again. First one call, then another, then 10. I let them ring out, each vibration like a ghost pounding on a door I'd already closed. Finally, I picked up. Her voice was sharp, breathless. "Elise, why didn't you tell us? Your father is furious. The neighbors keep calling, asking why we weren't there. You made us look ridiculous." Bill. I stared at the sunlight spilling through my window, the Oscar statue still sitting on my nightstand like a silent witness. "Mom," I said quietly, "I didn't hide it. I just stopped expecting you to listen." She exhaled, confused. "Listen to what? You could have said something." I smiled sadly. "I've been saying it my whole life. You just never heard me." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. I could hear the hum of her fridge in the background, the faint rustle of papers, her trying to find a script, a way to control the story again. "Your sister's upset," she said finally. "People keep asking about you instead of her. This isn't fair to her." That was when something inside me went perfectly still. "It's not a competition, Mom," I said. "It never was. You just made it one." Her breath caught. Then came the familiar sigh, the one she used whenever she didn't know how to answer without admitting the truth. "We'll talk later," she said, and hung up. I set the phone down gently. For the first time, her silence didn't sting, it just sounded small. Across the room, the morning news played the clip again, the one from the stage, my voice steady, my hands trembling as I spoke. "For every kid pushed to the edge of the table." The reporter smiled. "That's the line everyone's quoting today." By afternoon, it was everywhere. Late-night hosts, talk shows, think pieces dissecting what it meant for women, for artists, for quiet kids who grew up unseen. The irony wasn't lost on me. After years of feeling invisible, I had become a mirror for everyone else's invisibility. And, somehow, that made it enough. My mentor, Mrs. Lang, texted me later that night. "Lang, I told you you'd find your seat." Lang. Spotlight finally hit the right place. I sent her a photo I'd taken backstage, a candid from the end of the ceremony, when the audience was filing out. In the front section, there was a row of labeled chairs. Director, actor, producer. And right there, between two famous names, was a simple white card. Ellis Hart, nominee. My chair, my name, my seat. I sat there long after the crowd had gone, the theater nearly empty. The cleaning crew moved quietly around me, sweeping up glitter, folding programs, collecting champagne glasses. The air smelled of perfume and dust and victory. I remember tracing my name on the placard with my fingertip, feeling the texture of the paper, the weight of the ink. It was such a small, ordinary thing, a name printed on cardstock, but it was everything I'd ever wanted. Later, the studio photographer sent me the official backstage shots. In one of them, I was sitting in that chair, Oscar in my lap, eyes half closed as if I were finally exhaling after a lifetime of holding my breath. It didn't look glamorous, it looked human. That photo went viral too. People captioned it with things like, "Peace looks good on her," and "She didn't need the spotlight, she became it." Meanwhile, Mom kept calling. Then Dad. Then Chloe. The messages changed tone from anger to confusion to guilt. "We didn't know it was this big. Why didn't you tell us sooner? We would have come." I didn't reply. Not out of revenge, but because there was nothing left to explain. They had seen the table, now not theirs, but mine, and realized they no longer had a seat at it. That evening, Grandma called. Her voice cracked with pride. "I watched it 3 times, sweetheart. I saw your name on the chair." I smiled, the tightness in my chest finally breaking into warmth. "You always told me the right audience would hear me someday." She chuckled softly. And they did. The rest, well, they'll hear the echoes when it's quiet. Outside, Los Angeles glowed under a wash of gold and violet light. The city was loud, alive, celebrating something I still couldn't fully comprehend. I opened my balcony door, the evening breeze carrying the hum of traffic and laughter from somewhere far below. The Oscar gleamed faintly on the table beside me. I touched it once more, not as a trophy, but as proof that a girl who once sat at the far end of a folding chair could build her own stage from silence. My phone buzzed again, another wave of notifications, of strangers thanking me, of journalists quoting my words. But this time, I didn't pick it up. I just sat there, legs folded beneath me, breathing in the night. For the first time, the light didn't feel like it was burning through me. It felt like it was mine. A week after the Oscars, my parents asked to meet. The message came in short and cautious, not through the family chat, not through Chloe, just a plain text from Dad. "Dinner at our house. Just us. We'd like to talk." I stared at it for a long time. Part of me wanted to delete it. Another part, the quieter one, said this was the conversation I'd been walking toward my entire life. So I said yes, but on one condition. I'd host. My table, my rules. That Sunday, the house felt nothing like the glittering lodge in Aspen or the noise of Hollywood. I set the table with simple linen, a loaf of warm bread, a pot of vegetable soup simmering gently on the stove. No champagne, no centerpiece, just candles, flickering soft light across the wood. When they arrived, they looked smaller somehow, or maybe I had finally grown into my own space. Dad brought a bottle of wine he never uncorked. Mom clutched her purse like a shield. Chloe followed behind, hair perfectly curled, her pageant smile dimmed to something uncertain. "Dinner's ready," I said quietly, motioning toward the table. Saturday. The silence stretched, fragile and tight, like glass about to crack. The soup steamed gently between us. Finally, Mom cleared her throat. "We saw the speech again," she began. "It was beautiful. Just unexpected." "Unexpected?" I asked, my voice calm but even. She hesitated. "You've always been so private about your work. We didn't realize how much you had achieved." I folded my hands on the table. That's because every time I tried to talk about it, the conversation turned into Chloe's next event. Chloe's eyes flickered downward. Dad frowned slightly. "You know, we didn't mean to ignore you, Elise. We just thought that beauty would open more doors." I finished for him. He didn't answer, but the silence did. I took a breath, steady, deliberate. I've spent a long time trying to understand that logic. How you could see one child as the spotlight and the other as the shadow holding it up. Do you know how many Christmases I sat at the far end of the table? How many birthdays ended with someone saying, "Smile wider, Elise, or you'll ruin the picture"? How many times I tried to share something, and you cut me off to talk about Chloe's next pageant dress? Mom's eyes glistened. "We didn't know it hurt you that much." "It wasn't one moment," I said. "It was the repetition. It was learning that attention was conditional, that I had to earn it through silence, through patience, through work no one would ever applaud." The room fell quiet again, broken only by the faint crackle of the candles. Dad finally spoke, voice low, almost apologetic. We honestly thought we were helping. The world isn't kind to women. We figured if your sister had beauty, she could use it. If you had brains, you'd find your way. We just didn't expect your way would lead all the way there. I looked at him at the lines around his eyes, the hands that once pointed me toward the back row. You weren't wrong about the world being unfair, I said softly. But you helped build the same scales. I never wanted to take anything from Chloe. I just wanted the measure to be fair. I wasn't fighting the crown. I was fighting the weight of the crown being used as the only kind of worth. End of chapter 4. Chloe looked up then, her eyes glossy but steady. I didn't know, she said. I thought you just didn't care about this stuff. About family. I smiled faintly. That's the thing, Chloe. I cared too much. That's why it hurt so deeply. She reached for her glass, hands trembling. I'm sorry. I shook my head. You don't have to apologize for being loved. Just understand what it feels like not to be. Mom dabbed her eyes with a napkin. When we watched your speech, I kept thinking about how you said, for the kids at the edge of the table. I didn't realize you meant, our table. I met her gaze. It was always our table. For the first time, no one tried to fill the silence. We sat there 3 decades of misunderstanding floating between us like smoke. I didn't need them to beg forgiveness. What I wanted was something simpler, acknowledgement. So I said it plainly. I'm not asking for apologies or approval. I just need one thing from now on, respect my seat. Don't talk over it, don't erase it. Don't measure it against anyone else's, just see it. Dad nodded slowly, eyes heavy with something that almost looked like regret. That's fair. Mom reached across the table, her hand hesitating before touching mine. You built something we never could have imagined. I don't know how to make up for the past, but I see you now. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't cinematic, but it was enough. Dinner continued quietly. We talked about neutral things, the soup, the weather, the view from my balcony. Chloe laughed once, softly, when she mentioned how the internet had started calling me the writer who healed the world. I laughed too, because the world still had a long way to go. When they left, Mom hugged me brief but real. Dad shook my hand like he used to when I was a kid, helping him carry boxes from the garage. Chloe lingered at the doorway. Can I text you? She asked. Of course, I said. When the door closed, the house felt still again. I looked at the empty chairs around the table, the ones we had finally filled with truth, not performance. For years, I'd imagined this confrontation as a battle, something explosive and loud. But in reality, it was quiet, like a scene fading to black after the final line. The candlelight flickered, catching the edges of the breadcrumbs and soup bowls. I whispered to myself, half a prayer, half a release. Every chair has its place now. Then I sat back down in my own chair and for the first time, it didn't feel like I was waiting for anyone to offer me a seat. It was already mine. The following morning, I returned to where it had all begun, my desk. The same wooden one I'd bought secondhand years ago, still covered with faded post-its and coffee rings. The Oscar sat quietly on the shelf above it, its gold surface catching the soft morning light that spilled through the curtains. It didn't gleam like a prize anymore. It glowed like a reminder not of victory, but of voice. I turned on the small desk lamp, the same one that had once lit my scripts in the cramped apartment years ago, and opened a blank document. The cursor blinked in rhythm with my breathing. For a while, I just stared at it, listening to the hum of the city outside, the gentle creak of the chair beneath me. Then, without forcing it, the words began to flow again. The story wasn't about fame or family anymore. It was about the small, invisible moments, the quiet persistence of those who keep creating even when no one claps. Somewhere between sentences, I realized something. I didn't need to write for them anymore. Not for validation, not for proof. I was writing for that 14-year-old girl who sat at the far end of the table, waiting for someone to notice she was there. I was writing for the countless others still sitting at their own edges, believing they're invisible. The statue on the shelf caught a flicker of sunlight, and for a moment, it felt like the room itself was breathing with me. My voice, once small, now steady, played in my head, echoing what I had said that night. For every kid pushed to the edge of the table. But this time, I wanted to add something more. A whisper that had grown inside me since. You don't need a crown to have light. You just need a story that's true. Because the truth, once spoken, once written, shines brighter than any spotlight ever could. Later that evening, I walked out to the balcony. The city glowed below me, Los Angeles at sunset, all gold and rose and endless hum. Somewhere in the distance, I could hear faint applause from a theater down the street, a live show finishing its curtain call. It made me smile. For so long, I had chased applause like oxygen. Now, I understood it was just an echo. The real sound that mattered was the one you make when you finally believe in your own voice. I went back inside, opened my journal, and wrote a single line on the first page of a new story. Every table can be rebuilt. The rest, I knew, would come naturally, not from pain anymore, but from peace. And to you, listening to this story, maybe you've been overlooked, compared, or quietly dismissed. Maybe you've built something beautiful in the shadows, waiting for someone to finally turn and see it. Don't wait anymore. Tell your story. Build your own stage, your own table, your own light. Because the world doesn't just need perfection, it needs truth, it needs yours. Wherever you are in Denver, Manila, Johannesburg, Melbourne, if you've ever been left out of the spotlight, know this: you are not alone. Tell me where you're listening from. Because somewhere, under a different sky, I'm writing and I'm listening too.